This is the second in a series of tutorials for the Anglican Office Book, 2nd edition. This video will present an overview of the structure of the church year, the calendar, and the ranks of ferias and feasts. So it's important to understand that the church year centers around two principal cycles. The Christmas, Easter, Trinity cycle on one hand, which is centered around the date of Christmas, December 25th, and the variable date of Easter. On the other hand, we have the sanctoral cycle, which centers around the feasts and commemorations of the mysteries of the Christian faith and the lives of the saints, and these are generally attached to calendar days. Keeping both of these cycles together is not as difficult as it might seem at first glance. Now, the calendar provided at the beginning of the Anglican Office Book actually incorporates both of these cycles directly. And the way we can tell the difference is everything in black text in the calendar tables concerns the sanctoral cycle, those feasts of the saints that occur on particular days of the year. The red text in the calendar tables helps us see how the Christmas and Easter cycle will correspond in any given year to the sanctoral cycle. So, for example, the civil year beginning January 1st, we're told on the 18th of January, which happens to be in the sanctoral cycle, the feast of St. Prisca, that this is also the earliest possible date for Septuagesima to begin. We also see on the February table that the 21st of February is the latest possible date for Septuagesima. Which one of these dates in between these two that Septuagesima falls is entirely dependent in any given year on Easter and when it's dated. So we can see the same is given for Easter. March 22nd is the earliest possible date, and April 25th is the latest. And this material is also reproduced within the propers of the seasons and the saints for easy reference. Now, of course, today we don't have to rely on mathematical tables to calculate Easter. We can just go online, which is why, unlike in the classical editions of the Book of Common Prayer, I did not include the tables for reckoning Easter in the Anglican Office Book, as arcane and interesting as they might be. So if you consult any good calendar, particularly those online that would represent the pre-1955 Roman breviary or the Western Rite prior to the alterations made in the late 60s, it will correspond decently well with the calendar in the Anglican Office Book. In fact, the whole of the sanctoral and seasonal calendar is that of the pre-1955 Latin Rite, and therefore, with the few exceptions of English saints or particular persons that are important to Anglicans, the calendar is largely the same as that of the Universal Western Rite pre-1955. Thus, for example, the Anglican Breviary, the Anglican Missal, the American Missal will all largely correspond to the calendar in the Anglican Office Book. Now, together with understanding the two calendars and two cycles of the calendar and how they relate to each other, we also have to understand the reckoning of the Christian day. And unfortunately, this is something that has become rather confused in the past 70 years, really since about 1955 or so. Classically, the Christian day, following the Old Testament Jewish practice, begins at evening and goes through to the evening of the next day. So, for example, in the book of Genesis, in the creation we read, and it was evening, and it was morning the first day, and so on. So when we talk about the structure of each day in the church's liturgical life, we have to understand that the celebration of any given feast will always begin the evening before the civil day. So, for example, today is September 2nd, which is a memorial of St. Stephen of Hungary. Now, we will have actually begun the memorial of St. Stephen last night, September 1st, in the evening, and it will carry through today. And then this evening, if we had a feast on September 3rd, which we do not, we would then begin the feast of September 3rd tonight at evensong. So as an example of that, the feast of St. James the Apostle on July 25th. This feast begins the evening before, on July 24th, with what is called First Evensong. We see the same here on July 26th with St. Anne, the Mother of Our Lady. And we see we have First and Second Evensongs. Now, we will go into more detail with this later, but to suffice it to say, the modern liturgies, whether that be the 1979 book of the Episcopal Church, the 2019 book of the Anglican Church in North America, the Missal of Pope Paul VI, and the breviary that matches that, the Liturgy of the Hours, all of these books, for the most part, begin the liturgical day when the civil day begins, which is at midnight and runs from midnight to midnight. So for most feasts, they would begin in the morning of the calendar day itself. So this is perhaps the primary challenge people will have to overcome in adopting an office like the Anglican Office Book if they have been used to praying one of the more modern liturgies of the hours. The day always runs from evening to evening. Now, each day itself has a particular kind of what we call rank. And the rank is just what it sounds like. It's a way of designating the relative importance and nature of any given day. We have two primary rankings. We have what are called feasts, and we have what are called ferias. Feria just being a Latin term referring to what we might think of as weekday or a work day, a Monday through a Saturday in our reckoning. A feast is a particular celebration of a saint or a mystery of the faith. And what we have is the assumption that every day of the year is a feria, unless there is a saint's day assigned to it, in which case it ceases to be a feria and becomes a feast. It's important to draw this broad distinction between ferial and festal days, as that rank will determine how we say the office each day. Ferial days are generally all of the same rank, that is, the lowest possible rank. Any feast will supersede the observance of a ferial day, with a handful of exceptions, and these are what we would call our greater weekdays. And this will be explained in more detail later. Feasts, in most cases, supersede the ferias, and the feasts themselves are subdivided into varying ranks. For the purposes of the material that's necessary to say the office itself in this book, these particular sub-rankings do not have great significance. However, they are necessary in determining who should receive priority if we were to have, say, what we call a double of the first class and a greater double fall on the same calendar day. So in brief, with feasts, we have three main subcategories. We have doubles of the first class, doubles of the second class, and then greater doubles. These will represent the most important feasts on the church calendar. Doubles of the first class being the highest possible rank. These give way to no other celebration whatsoever. So for example, we have Christmas. We have Easter would be considered a double of the first class, the Transfiguration of our Lord, etc. Doubles of the second class are still of primary importance, but they would give way to a double of the first class, so they are lower in rank. Examples of these would be the feasts of Our Lady, the feast of St. Michael and the angels, the conversion of St. Paul, and others. Then, one rank below doubles of the second class are the greater doubles. And these are mostly the feasts of the apostles and the evangelists, with certain other important figures, particularly to English tradition, such as the feast of Our Lady of Walsingham. All other feasts that will be found on the calendar are called lesser doubles. And lesser doubles are the normal ranking of feasts. These would be for your general saints who are not biblical figures, who have come later in the history of the church. Now, the feasts themselves are shown, as far as their rankings go, in two different places within the Anglican Office Book. The first place where we can see what ranking any given feast has is by looking at the calendar tables. So, for example, if we look on May 9th, we'll see St. Gregory of Nazianzen. He is given a double rank, and that means a lesser double rank. If we look over on June 11th, we'll see St. Barnabas the Apostle. Now, he is ranked slightly higher. He's given a greater double rank. If we were to turn forward to August, on August 6th, we would see in bold letters, uppercase letters, the Transfiguration of our Lord Jesus Christ, a double of the first class. And that's the highest possible ranking. These particular rankings can also be generally seen by the typeface in the propers of the seasons and the saints themselves. So, for example, double feasts of the first class will be given in Gothic script. For an example of that, we can turn to Whitsunday, the Feast of Pentecost, and there we have our Gothic script indicating that this is a double of the first class. Likewise, doubles of the second class are given in bold capital letters. To see that, we could turn here, the octave day of Corpus Christi, which is a double of the second class in bold capital letters. Lesser double feasts are given in bold print. These would be all of your lesser, greater doubles, and your memorials. An example of that is if we turn here into the proper of the saints, we will see St. Stephen of Hungary in regular bold letters, and it's indicated directly if it's a memorial or not, all throughout the proper of the saints. So if we see a saint with the regular bold typeface and the memorial underneath it, we understand then that this particular feast carries the lowest rank which is that of memorial. However, if we were to see one such as the beheading of St. John Baptist, it does not say memorial. That means that this is going to be either a lesser or greater double feast, and if we want to know specifically which it is, we would need to turn to our calendar tables for August. And we could look at August 29th, beheading of St. John Baptist, and we see he's just a regular old double or lesser double. Now, there are a few other rankings of days that are important to consider. The next, attached to the feasts, are what are called octaves. Octaves are a way by which the church calendar extends the celebration of a particular feast over a period of 8 days. This is a way of drawing a special attention to the feast. There are 4 rankings of octaves in the Anglican Office Book. The highest rank are called principal octaves, those of Christmas, Easter, and Pentecost. These octaves take precedence of all feasts. The second rank are primary octaves. These octaves will take precedence over all feasts except doubles of first or second class. Secondary octaves are done by way of a memorial each day within the octave of the particular feast. And the final ranking are called memorial octaves, wherein nothing is observed of the octave throughout the 8 days until the final day, the 8th day, or what is called the octave day proper, at which point there is a simple memorial of the particular saint. We also have Sundays, which in the office are given their own character. Every Sunday is essentially a little Easter, and so it carries with it an inherent dignity in the office. We have 2 primary types of Sundays. They're called Greater Sundays and Lesser Sundays. Greater Sundays are those of a special prominence, such as the 4 Sundays of Advent, the Sunday after the Ascension, the Sundays after Easter, etc. These Sundays give way to no feast whatsoever, with only a few exceptions. And those exceptions would be first or second class double feasts. Generally speaking, the rubrics within the proper of the seasons will make it very clear how these Sundays are to be observed. All the rest of the Sundays, those after Christmas, those after Epiphany, and those after Trinity, or what's known as Trinity Tide, are called Lesser Sundays. And these Sundays easily give way to feasts of the first, second class, and of greater doubles. Now, lest this all seem hopelessly confusing, we have tables that let us know what to do when we have what is called an occurrence or concurrence. That is, for an occurrence, if we have 2 feasts that happen to fall on the same day. So, for example of this, one that happens very often would be the second Sunday of Advent and the Feast of Our Lady's Conception. Now we can look in our tables and see that the second Sunday of Advent is a high-ranked Sunday. It's called a Greater Sunday. The Feast of Our Lady's Conception is a double of the second class, which is the second highest rank of feasts. So what do we do if those 2 feasts fall on the same day? Well, this is called occurrence. So we will come to this table and we will say we have a Greater Sunday. That's our second Sunday after Advent. and it occurs with a second-class double. When we bring both of these together, we get the number 3. And this will tell us, in this case, that we will need to have the office of A, which is the greater Sunday, the transfer of B, B being the second-class double. So we would actually transfer Our Lady to a following open day. Now this might be different for some of you who are used to the rubrics of the old Latin breviary. In the Anglican Office Book, following prayer book custom, Sundays are given pride of place for dignity. For a fuller treatment of the Sundays and how they rank, I would encourage you to read page 17 of the general rubrics. Finally, we could also have what's called a concurrence. And this is when the second evensong of a feast falls on the same day as an incoming first evensong of another feast. This happens very often, and it usually happens with feasts of the same rank, for example, of a lesser double rank. In many cases, in the proper of the saints, when this occurs, there will be a rubric to let you know which evensong to pray if there is a discrepancy in the rank. So, for example, March 24th is the feast of Saint Gabriel the Archangel. When we come to his second evensong, though, we see that we have the very next day, March 25th, the Annunciation of Our Lady, a feast of double first-class rank with a full first evensong. And so the rubrics helpfully tell us that on the evening of March 24th, evensong will be of the following feast of the Annunciation with a memorial of Saint Gabriel. Now, if we didn't know for sure how to do this, and if there wasn't a rubric given for us, how would we know? Well, again, we consult two things. We'll go to our calendar for March, and we will look up the rank of Saint Gabriel on the 24th, and we see he's a double. The next day, Annunciation of Our Lady is a double of the first class. So if we want to know which evensong we should do, we'll go to the table of concurrence on page Roman numeral 21 of the rubrics. And so we will have the second evensong, which is of a regular double, and that corresponds to the incoming first evensong of the Annunciation, which is a double of the first class right here. And we'll bring these two together and get the number 4, which tells us that first evensong should be of B. And under ordinary circumstances, nothing at all would be observed of the outgoing feast. There are exceptions, as in this particular case, where the rubrics tell us that we make a memorial of Saint Gabriel. The saying of feasts will be made clearer when we actually begin to walk through the offices of Matins and Evensong. One final note concerns a phrase that will be seen throughout the office book, and that is the phrase, throughout the year. This is a technical phrase. As we see right here on page 20 of the rubrics, throughout the year ordinarily denotes the seasons outside of Lent and Paschal Tide. So that is from the first Sunday of Lent all the way through the end of the octave of Whitsun. The rest of the year would be known as throughout the year, generally speaking. And that ends this second tutorial for the Anglican Office Book.